Okay, so now with the plane in our project, we are going to make a sort of a spawn island lobby system. And from there, we can then put the players on the plane. So there's really a lot of stuff to do with the game mode and the game state in this lesson. But by the end of it, our player will spawn in and be attached to the plane. To get started, we're going to add some lobby UI. So we'll right click in our UI folder and make a new widget blueprint. When I say lobby, I essentially just mean the starter island or the spawn island. So I'm going to call this lobby. And the lobby UI is going to be very simple. It's just going to be one piece of text. I'm going to anchor it to the bottom. And I'm going to align it like this. And then we'll make the size 200. And we'll position it on the Y so that it's a little bit up. So like maybe -50. And let's actually make it 1000 in width. If we go down, we're going to center the text as well. Okay, so I'm going to put, for the text, I'll just put something like game begins in 10 seconds. But what we're going to do is we're actually going to bind this as well. So let's click on create binding and we'll call this get game status text. And the way the game status text is going to work is it's going to get the game state, so it's going to get the state of the game. And the game state is available on both the server and the clients, so anyone can access this. And we're going to cast it to our own game state. And we want to know whether or not the lobby has started. Now, we don't have a thing for the lobby yet, because we really haven't made any lobby stuff. So we're going to be working on that now. And then we can come back and fill in the lobby. So we'll go into the blueprints, and we're going to go to the... I think it's first person BP blueprints actually. We'll find it in there. This one called BR game state. And BR game state, we need to add the lobby and the timer stuff to that. Inside of BR game state, we're going to be adding a lot of functionality related to the lobby in here. And the functionality will sort of all kick off on begin play. And because the starting of the game is quite an important thing and it affects all the players, we're just going to handle it all through the server. So we're going to do a switch has authority. And what we're going to do is we're going to call a function called try start lobby timer. So I'll right click and make that. Try start lobby timer. Remember, begin play will get called on both the servers and it'll get called on everyone that's connected to the game. And then if we're the server, we can react by using this pin. So try start lobby timer. And we're going to have a variable that tracks the amount of people left alive in the game. Because you remember how I said the game state sort of tracks the current state of the game, like where things are at. And so one thing that would be really useful to track is how many players are left alive in the game. So we're going to add a variable for that, and we're going to call this players left alive. And that would just be a number, so an integer is what we're going to use for that. And we also want that to be replicated so that the server controls that value, because we don't want clients controlling the amount of people left alive in the game. We want the server to keep track of that. So what we're going to do is, when we try to start the lobby timer, what we need to do is we need to check that there's actually enough people in the game to start the game. Because if there was only one person in the game, we'd want to wait until more people have joined before we start the game. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a greater than or equal to and check that players left alive is greater than or equal to the number 2. And this way we can guarantee there's enough people to actually start a game. And at this point we can do a branch. I'm going to go ahead and plug this in like this. Now if there isn't enough people left to start the game, I'm going to wait 1 second by using a delay node. And I'll select 1. And then once I'm finished with that delay, I'm just going to try to start the lobby again. So if there's no players in the game, it's going to come here, it's going to wait and then try again. And it's going to keep doing that until finally there are enough players and this true pin is going to be called. And at this point, we want to start the lobby basically. Now, We'll make a variable for this as well. Where it says game over, I'm going to hit Control W and I'm going to call this one lobby started. So this is tracking whether or not the lobby has actually started, and we need to replicate this so that clients know whether or not the lobby has started so they can put it on the UI. So I'm going to hold Alt and drag it into here, and I'm going to check this box that says lobby started. So now the lobby has definitely been started. I'm going to make a timer for the lobby, and the timer is going to tick down, and then when it gets to 0, the game will start. So what we need to do is we're going to use set timer by event, and this allows us to call an event every however we want many seconds. So I'm going to call it once per second, and I'm going to check this box to say that it's looping. And I need to tell it what event I want to be doing every 1 second. So I'm going to make another event called tick lobby timer. And I'm going to drag this part of the event and plug it in. So what we're saying is start the lobby, and then every 1 second call this event. So we have a timer calling our tick lobby event, and that's all well and good. One problem though is that once the game started, we don't want to keep ticking the timer because the game's already started. There's no point ticking that still. So one way to turn it off later on is to store the timer. You can see this actually returns a timer. So if I right click, promote to variable, and type in lobby timer handle, this is going to allow me to turn off the timer later on. Okay, so now we need to implement our lobby timer. I'm going to make a variable in my game state, and I'm going to call this lobby timer, I suppose, would be a good number, or a good name, sorry. So we'll click on players left alive and hit Control W to duplicate it, and I'm going to call it lobby timer. And in here, we can set the lobby timer to whatever we want it to be. So I want the players to have to wait 20 seconds before the game will start. In fact, no, let's do 10 seconds. So I'm going to type 10 for my lobby timer. So the lobby timer will start off at 10. And what we want it to do is every time this function ticks, we want to make the lobby time go down by 1. You might remember that we used the decrement for that. So hold Control, drag your lobby timer in and type decrement. And that will make the timer go down by 1. When the game's almost started, I want to spawn the plane into the map. So what I can say is if lobby timer, I'll drag up from here, if lobby timer is equal to 3, so if there is 3 seconds before the game starts, spawn the plane in. So I'm going to make a branch here. The way we're going to do it is the game state is going to spawn the plane in. Right now we just have the plane dragged and dropped into the level. I think if we search for it, it might be in here somewhere. Oh, no, I must have gotten rid of it. But yeah, you don't want a plane in your level. We're going to spawn it inside of this game state here. And actually, we'll need an event to do this. So I'm going to make an event called spawn plane. Okay. So spawn plane, if we're on the server, because the server handles spawning of the plane, we're going to spawn an actor. And from the drop-down menu, we want to spawn our plane, so make sure that you select BP plane. And the spawn transform, it doesn't really matter because the plane's going to move itself automatically, but for now, let's just do get actor transform. And we really don't need to change any other settings on the plane, but we will store the plane in a variable so that people can track it later on. So we're going to right-click on the plane and promote it to a variable, and we'll call that variable plane. Okay. And let's make this replicated as well. Okay, so this is spawning the plane. Let's start commenting this stuff as well. Spawn plane, start lobby timer on begin play, tick lobby timer, register lobby timer. So we just want to track this stuff as well. So if there are only 3 seconds remaining on our timer, I'm going to spawn the plane in. So if that's true, we're going to go ahead and spawn the plane. If that's not true, then it must be some other number, right? It must not be 3. So in that case, let's go ahead and check if it's less than or equal to 0. Because if the timer's ticked down to 0 or less, then it's time to start the game. So we're going to do a branch here to check if that's true. So if it's not 3, then we'll check if it's less than 0. And if that's true, we're going to begin the game. So begin game is going to be another function, or another event, sorry. So we'll call that begin game. And we'll just drag out and type in begin game. And that's pretty much all that we need to do. The begin game stuff is going to do some fairly simple things, nothing too tricky. We do want to duplicate lobby started though, and we're going to make something called game started. So we're going to track whether the lobby's actually finished and the game has now started, as well as whether the lobby started. So now that the game's started, we can turn off that timer. So just drag the handle in and then type in clear and invalidate timer. And that will stop the timer from ticking down because we really don't want it to tick down anymore. We'll also set game started. So hold Alt and drag that in and set that to true. So the game has now started. And then what we're going to do is we're going to get the game mode. We're going to cast it to a BR game mode. And then we're going to let the game mode do some stuff as well, because the game mode will need to do some things. What the game mode's going to do is it's going to tell all the players to attach to the plane, which has kind of been the whole point of this video. I know this is a bit long-winded, but we're just making sure stuff's really structured so it's easy as we go on. I'm going to save the lobby as well. So in our game mode, we actually need to do a little bit more work as well. So we're going to come into our game mode, which is here. And we're just going to add the on game started. So right click, add an event, and we're going to call this on game started. And one other thing I want to do really quick as well is build a list of all the people that are in the game right now. That's going to be really useful to track who's in the game. And we'll be using that a lot. And we'll put it in the game. Yeah, we'll put it in the game mode. So what I'm going to do is under variables, I'm going to make something called player list. And I'm going to go to the variable type, and it's going to be BR player controller. And if you click here, we want to make it an array, which is basically just a list of items. It's a list of players that are in the game. There's an event called onPostLogin. If we right click and type onPostLogin, this is called when someone joins the game. So what we're going to do is we're going to onPostLogin. We're going to go and we're going to get the game state. We're going to cast it to our game state. And we're just going to check if the game's already started. So get game started. We're going to use a branch. And if the game hasn't started, then we're going to add them to the list. We don't want the player to be able to play if the game's already started. So, so if that's false, if the game has not started and we're still in the lobby, then what we'll do is we'll take the player that joined the game and make sure that they're a BR player controller, which they should be because that's the one we selected. Whoops, that should be that. Okay. And then we're going to take our player list and we're going to add them to the player list. We're also going to have a separate list called a live player list. So the player list will store all the players in the game, and the alive player list will store all the alive players in the game. So we're going to hit Control W on player list and type in a live player list. So we have two separate lists. We're also going to make sure that these are, actually no, these don't need to be replicated. So we're going to drag a live player list in and just do the same thing, add. And now what we need to do, you remember I had that number called players left alive? Well, what we're going to do now is we're going to drag out from the game state and we're going to set players left alive to the amount of players that are in the list. So get length. If you type in size, length should come up, and just click on length. And then from there, we can just plug that in. So what we're doing is we're just keeping track of the amount of players that are left alive in the game. Let's go back to our on-game started event, and we'll start to fill that in now. So we're going to take the player list, so hold Control, drag the player list in, and then we're going to loop through all of the players. So to go through a list and to access each thing inside of the list, you need to use something called a for each loop. So type for each, and this will allow us to loop through all of the players that are in the game. Now what we're going to do is we're going to set those players as being on the plane. We don't have a value for that yet, so we're going to go into the player controller. We're going to add a variable called isOnPlane. And we're going to replicate that as well, so that everyone else in the game knows that you're on the plane as well. So come back into your game mode now, drag off and type isOnPlane, and set it to true, because the player is now about to be on the plane. So we'll set isOnPlane to true. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to set the view target. What this means is each controller in our game, which we've got stored in here, has a view target. So when I hit play in my game, we are controlling the character. However, what I want to do is I want to make the character see from the point of view of the plane. So to do that, we use set view target with blend. And the thing that we want to be viewing is the plane. To get the plane, we're going to get the game state. We're going to cast it to our game state, drag off and get the plane. And that is the thing that we now want to be viewing. And then we want to do it for this controller. So now we've looped through all of the people in the game and we've told them that they are now viewing the plane. The next thing we're going to do is tell all the players that the game's begun. And the reason we need to do this is that so we can put their HUD on the screen, because we're going to have a lobby HUD on the screen, and you know that says waiting for players to join, or the game starts in 10 seconds or something. But now we want to put the health bar and the different things like that on the screen. So let's go into our BR player controller and we'll add an event called onGameBegun. And this is going to be a run on client reliable, because all of the stuff we're doing in here is all on the server, and we need to tell the actual client, the people playing the game, hey, the game's begun, so make sure you update your user interface. So let's go here and we'll drag out from here and tell the controller that the game has begun, and plug that in like that. Now we can double click on this to actually bring that up. So what this is going to do is it's going to check if it's us or someone else. It should be us, by the way. So we're going to check is local controller, because we're about to do some updating to the HUD, so we want to make sure it's local. And we're going to make something called the lobby widget. So let's go ahead and we'll duplicate the spectator HUD. So hit Control W. I'm going to call this lobby HUD. This is the HUD that's going to be shown in the lobby. And we're going to take the lobby HUD and we're going to remove it from the screen. And then we're going to add the main HUD to the screen, which is this one here, show in-game HUD. So go ahead and type show in-game HUD. We've removed the lobby HUD from the screen and now we're showing the in-game HUD. Okay. The next thing we want to do is we're going to, we want to force the player to fall from the plane. This is a little bit of a finicky thing we're doing, but think about this. If you are flying in on the plane and you don't drop, we want to force the player to drop after a certain amount of time. And otherwise, the player could just stay on the plane forever, and that would be really stupid. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a delay. So we're going to wait, and I'm going to right click. Well, actually, let's just type in 40 seconds. So we're going to wait for 40 seconds, and if you don't drop after 40 seconds, we're going to force you to drop from the plane. And to do that, we're going to check if you are on the plane. So drag this in and do a branch. And we'll make an event called drop from plane. Drop from plane. This is going to be a server event, and it's going to be reliable because dropping from the plane is pretty gameplay important, and we really want to run that through the server. So if you are still on the plane, we're going to drop from plane. Okay, so by default, the HUD that appears in the game is the in-game HUD, but we're going to change this so that the lobby HUD actually appears. You can see on begin play, we want to show the in-game HUD while we're changing that now. So let's go ahead and delete that. And we're just going to say that if we are a local controller, we're going to do a branch, make sure we're local, and then we're going to create the lobby widget. So create widget, we're going to select lobby. Owning player is going to be us, so self. And hold Alt and then drag lobby HUD onto there. We also need to click on lobby HUD and make sure that that's changed from spectator to the lobby one, like that, and change variable type. Compile. You're going to get an error as well. Just click on the error, hold Alt and disconnect that, and then just connect the new one in to fix that error. So we'll come back up here. We're going to hold Alt and then store lobby HUD inside of here. And then finally, what we can do is we can add it to the viewport. So just add to viewport. So now when the game starts, you'll see the lobby screen instead of the actual in-game HUD, because we're adding the in-game HUD to the screen, but we're going to do it a little bit later. So let's go ahead and just make sure that that works. We'll save and hit play. And you can see we don't have any HUD, so that's good. That's how it should be. You shouldn't be able to see anything anymore because the lobby screen is going to be up. While we're at it, let's go back into the lobby screen and let's finish the lobby screen off. So you remember we have that get game status text function inside of the lobby. So what we're going to do is we're going to get the game state, we're going to get the lobby timer, and we want to use something called a format text. So type format text and then type game begins in, and then we'll do seconds. And then we'll plug the lobby timer in. So what it's going to do is it's going to say game begins and then the amount of seconds that the lobby timer has remaining, and then it's going to say seconds. Okay. If it is equal to 1, this is just a bit of polish, but notice how we say seconds. Well, if there's 1 second remaining, it's going to say game begins in 1 seconds instead of 1 second. What we can do is we can just say if it's equal to 1, then do a select. And what that's going to do is we can plug this in here, and then in here we can just say game begins in 1 second. So what that's going to do, if this is 1, use this text, otherwise use this text. And then plug that in there. It's really not a big deal, but I just like to make sure we have a little bit of polish in there and keep things looking nice. One remaining thing is if the lobby does not have enough people in it, we want to say waiting for players. So that way you know that more people need to join the game before we start the game. So drag out and type in lobby started. We're going to get lobby started, and we're going to use another select. I kind of like using these selects. So type in select. So if the lobby has started, we can use this. value. If the lobby hasn't started though, I'm just going to say waiting for more players ... Okay. And there we have it. So now when we come into the game, it should say waiting for more players, and now it's counting down. That's fine. You'll see the countdown. But notice that if we come into the game and we only have, say, one player in the game, it should say waiting for more players, and notice the timer doesn't start this time. So it does work as we want, but we still have some more things before this video is finished out. We're also going to do something in this video that is UI related, and we're going to do a UI animation. And what I want to do, basically the effect I'm going to go for here, is when you spawn onto the plane, there's kind of this white flash and then it fades out, and it's kind of like a graceful way for us to show the player, hey, you've been teleported onto the plane. So to achieve this effect, I'm going to take an image in the palette section and I'm going to drag this in, and I'll center this to the center of the screen. And I'm going to make it really big. I'll make it 3000 by 3000 and set the alignment to be 0.5 by 0.5 and then change the positions to be 0 and 0. So basically it's just this massive white thing that's covering up the entire screen. And what we want to do is we want to fade this out over time. So to fade it out, I'm going to make an animation. You can see there's this little animations tab down here. You can click add animation. And I'm going to call this animation on enter plane. So this animation is going to happen when we enter the plane. So we're going to start out with this white block here. And so if I click on enter plane, at the start we're going to make the let's see, the color and opacity. So we're going to come to color and opacity, and basically the animation's made up of keyframes. So if I just add a keyframe here, what we're saying is at the start of the animation I want this to be completely white. We'll go to 1 second and then we'll add the same keyframe to basically say for the first second of the animation make sure this is white, and then after 1 second I'm going to start to fade it out. And the way I do that is I'm going to change the alpha to 0, and then I'm going to click add keyframe again. So let's take a look at what this looks like. We're going to drag the slider back to 0 and then hit play. And that's what the effect is basically going to look like in the game. You'll get spawned in and you can see that's what it's going to look like. Pretty standard, nothing too crazy going on there. What I'm also going to do is, you can see this is the, I'll also call this flash effect maybe. Let's call it something like that. Now if we click on this thing that says text E take assault rifle, I'm going to change this to say prompt text. So this is kind of prompting the player to do something, and I'm going to check the box that says is variable as well. And what I want to do is I'm going to go into the graph and go to get pickup text. And pretty much what I want is I just want it to check if we're on the plane. And if we are on the plane, I want it to tell us to press E to drop from the plane. So let's go back to the start. I'm going to hold Alt and then click to get rid of this. And we're going to get the player controller. And we're going to cast it to our player controller so that we can check if we're on the plane or not. You remember we have is on plane. So get is on plane. And use a branch to check whether we are on the plane or not. If we are on the plane, I'm going to add a return node, and I'm going to say square brackets E drop from plane. So now people know that they can drop from the plane by pressing E, otherwise they'd have no idea. And then if it's false, we can just plug into there and do the standard weapon pickup stuff that we've been doing all along. Okay, so that will be really good. It should work fine. I'm just trying to think if there's anything. We need to play the animation. This is really easy to do. If you go into the event graph, on the onConstruct, type in play animation, and then under the animations, under variables here, hold Control, and then we'll just plug our animation into the in animation part. And that will now play the animation when we spawn into the game. My God, guys, this has been a really long video. I'm really sorry. There's probably only like 5 or 10 minutes left of stuff to do before we can finally spawn in on the plane and drop from the plane. So hang in there, this tutorial's almost over. What we're going to do is we're going to add an input action that will allow the player to drop from the plane. And to pick up weapons, actually, currently we use E. I'm going to make the button to drop from the plane, I'm going to make it F. So press F to drop from the plane, basically. So we'll type in F. And actually, if I go back to my in-game, I need to just go back to my graph, get pickup text, and just change this to be an F instead of an E. Okay. So in the player controller, I'm going to, just above my drop from plane event, I'm going to type in drop from plane. And under input action events, click on that one. So when I press the F key to drop from the plane, I want to check, am I already on the plane or have I not dropped yet? So use a branch to check if we're still on the plane or not. And if we are still on the plane, then we can drop from the plane. So hold Alt and set is on plane to false. And then we're going to tell the server, hey, we actually want to drop from the plane because the server is going to handle dropping from the plane. So let's go into the server and let's do it on here. So on the server, drop from plane, we'll set that to false, so you're no longer on the plane. And now we're going to get the game state, so get game state. We're going to cast it. And we want to get the plane so that we can attach you to the plane. So, well, now that you've dropped from the plane, actually, we need to set the planes, we need to set you equal to where the plane is, basically. So we're going to get the transform of the plane by typing get actor transform. And then we're going to drag out and set actor transform. What are we doing here? We want to set our player's position. So get the controlled pawn. Because we're in our player, so to get the player we're controlling, or the pawn we're controlling, you need to call that. And that's going to return our character, and from there, we can do set actor transform. So we're basically setting our player to drop from the plane now. We're setting their transform to the plane's transform, and this will make you start falling from the sky. We're also going to set the control rotation, so let's break this up. And set control rotation. This is going to make you face the same way that the plane's heading in. And I know this is pretty crazy. There's a lot going on here, I know, guys, but what we need to do is we want to take the controlled pawn and we want to set it back to as our view target so that we're now looking through the eyes of our player. And one cool thing here is you can do something called a blend time, and this will give you a really cool effect where it translates, well, it sort of interpolates between the plane and our player. So I'm going to type 0.5, and you'll see the blend happen later on as well. Okay, so the last thing that we need to do, I know there's so much going on here, but we need to change some of the movement settings so that our player will fall from the sky. So let's go ahead, we'll open up our player inside of first person BP blueprints, and let's do the flying logic, because we want our player to float into the level and not just drop to the ground normally. So I'll be right back and we'll do that, and that's basically the last thing we need to do. Okay, so we're in BR character now. I'm going to actually comment this here. You don't have to be too strict about commenting, but I just like to make sure everything's nicely commented. When you come back to read through your code, it just reminds you what everything is doing, because it can be quite hard to, keep track of the stuff. So what we're going to do is we're going to change the character's movement depending on whether or not they're flying. So I'm going to make an event that allows you to set flying. So set flying. And it's going to take one input, and that is whether or not we are now flying or whether we're not flying anymore. So flying. And we're going to right click and promote this to a variable called flying. And we're going to make this a rep notify because we want to do some special logic after this is changed. In fact, we don't need a rep notify. Let's just go with a replicated. That should work fine. Because right after we set it, we're going to do something called update movement. So we'll add a custom event called update movement. And then update the movement. So set the player to be flying or not flying or whatever. And then once we've done that, make sure that we update the movement. So hold control, drag the movement in, and we're going to be changing. You see, there's so many options here, but we're just going to change a few of them. And we'll be able to give the player the feeling as if they're flying. So we're going to set the max walk speed. And we're going to use something called a select here. We did it before, so hold control and drag flying in, and then type select. And then plug that in there. So if we are flying, I want to use my walk speed as 2000 so that we can really move through the air fast. Because the map's really big, and when you're high above it, unless you have a really high walk speed, you won't be able to get to where you want to go. If we're on the ground, I'm going to set your walk speed to be 600. The next thing I want to set is I want to set the air control. This is the amount of control that you have when you're in the air. So we're going to go to air control. And we're going to do another select here. So if we are flying, I'm going to give the player full air control, so 1. And if we're not flying, I'm going to give the player only a little bit of control when they're in the air. Okay, so that's the air control, and there's only a couple more we want to do. We want to modify the player's gravity as well, so let's drag out character movement, set gravity scale. And you can try and play around with a bunch of these values as well, guys. There's really just so many options here to change, but I'm just doing a few just to keep things nice and simple. So gravity scale, we're going to set using a select. So plug that in there. So your gravity scale, if you're flying, is going to be 0.2, and if you're on the ground, it's just going to be 1, which means normal gravity. And then the last one is the max acceleration. And we're going to turn the max acceleration up if you are not flying. So drag flying in, or actually, we already did that. We can just connect that up like, oops. We need to make our select first. And then just connect that up like so. And then we're going to put 2048. Otherwise, we'll do 512. So that's the movement updated. And we want to change the player so that they're not flying when they hit the ground. So basically, when the player hits the ground, they're not flying anymore. So we need to account for this. So we'll go ahead and click on the capsule component. And the capsule component has this thing called on component hit. If you scroll down, here it is here. So when our capsule collision hits the ground, we're going to check, are you actually on the ground, or did you just hit another player on accident? So is moving on ground. So if you are moving on the ground, then set flying to false. And that should be it. Man, I'm sorry guys. I said that was it, but it turns out we actually forgot some things. So we're going to have to go back and finish this off. So in the begin game, in our game state, we're going to drag up from game mode, and we added something called on game started, but we never actually called that. So we need to make sure that we're calling that as well. And then I believe that should be it. Did I say we were done? Yeah, I lied again. There's one last thing to do, and we have to get our player after we drop. So I'm in BR player controller where we drop from the plane, and I just didn't set the player as flying. So when you drop out of the plane, you just fall to your death, and it's really stupid. So what we're going to do is we're going to get the controlled pawn. We are going to cast it to a BR character, And then from there, we are going to set the character as flying. So set flying, and then check the box that says true. Now let's go ahead and test this out. This is a lot of stuff that's going on. But hopefully this now works. So let's go into the game. Game begins in blah, blah, blah seconds. And there we go. So the screen flashes white and we're on the plane, and the plane's completely random, like I mentioned before. If we press F, we should be able to come out of the plane and check it out. I can now fly through the air because my movement settings have changed. I can fly through the air. Oh no. Damn it. Yeah, well, you get the point. That's pretty much it. That's flying in on the plane. There's kind of one more thing that I guess we could change as well, which is some UI stuff, but I'm just going to leave it and we'll do that in the next video. So anyways, guys, there's the plane done. I'm so happy that we have this in, and I'll see you in the next one. I think we're going to do the storm or the safe zone in the next video, so that'll be really exciting. Anyways, I'll see you guys there. See you later.